Before the first cannon fired at Fort Sumter, before the Union or Confederacy even existed, America was already fighting a war, not with armies, but with ideas, a war of fear. In the late 1850s, Southern leaders convinced millions that the North was plotting to destroy them, to free enslaved people, arm them, and unleash chaos across the South. They said Abraham Lincoln was the mastermind of this conspiracy, and when that lie caught fire, it burned a whole nation. By 1850, the Southern economy was built entirely on slavery. Cotton was king, and enslaved labor made it possible. But up north, the abolitionist movement was growing fast. Harriet Beecher, Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, spread empathy for enslaved people like wildfire. Newspapers printed stories of escape attempts and Underground Railroad heroes. To Southern politicians, this wasn't just moral debate, it was war talk. Southern newspapers warned of Yankee fanatics plotting slave revolts. Preachers thundered that the North wanted to destroy God's natural order. It didn't matter that most Northerners weren't radical abolitionists. Paranoia doesn't need facts, it only needs fear. Then came John Brown, a man who turned fear into reality. In 1859, Brown, a militant abolitionist, led a small band to seize the federal arsenal at Harpers Ferry, Virginia. His plan? Arm enslaved people and start a massive rebellion. The raid failed. Brown was captured, tried, and hanged. But in the South, it didn't matter that most Northerners condemned him. To them, Brown became the proof that all their fears were true. They believed more John Browns were coming, armed by Northern conspirators and backed by the Republican Party. When Abraham Lincoln ran for president in 1860, Southern newspapers didn't see a politician, they saw a traitor. Caricatures showed him as the devil, the black Republican, leading an army of fanatics. Lincoln kept insisting he would not interfere with slavery where it already existed. But fear doesn't listen. To the South, his election meant the North had fallen to the abolitionists. The John Brown nightmare was now in the White House. Within weeks of Lincoln's victory, 7 Southern states seceded, before he even took office. That's how powerful paranoia can be. It doesn't wait for proof. It acts on fear. Southern leaders used fear like fuel. They held fiery meetings, warning that abolitionists planned to massacre slaveholders in their sleep. In the press, they printed wild claims that Northern teachers were infiltrating schools to indoctrinate slaves, that preachers were sending coded messages to spark revolts. None of it was true, but in a world before radio or television, newspapers were gospel. And when people believe their survival is at stake, logic disappears. This culture of panic unified the South, not around policy but around fear of annihilation. By 1861, that fear made war seem not only inevitable, but righteous. When Lincoln finally took office, he tried to calm the nation. He said, "We are not enemies, but friends." But to many Southerners, the words of a Northern conspirator meant nothing. They believed the federal government had been captured by radicals, that slavery's end would mean their own. In April 1861, Confederate cannons opened fire on Fort Sumter. The Civil War had begun, not because of a sudden spark, but because years of paranoia had filled the air with gunpowder. Over 600,000 Americans died in the Civil War, more than in any other U.S. conflict. And it all began with rumors that the North was arming the enslaved, rumors that Lincoln was a conspirator. Fear spread faster than truth ever could. The tragedy is that slavery was dying economically, and peaceful emancipation might have been possible. But fear made compromise impossible. It's a reminder when leaders use fear to control, history always bleeds. Paranoia built walls between Americans, and those walls turned into battle lines. If you learned something new today, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves history. Do you think the Civil War was inevitable, or could truth have stopped the fear? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. And remember, history isn't just about the past. It's about how fear and misinformation can still divide us today.